This one's going to be a little bit off the cuff today. I've been noting with interest some conversations like the following. A young woman or a young man goes out into the street with a microphone, and he or she then sets about to interview passers-by, other young men, other young women, older people, and the person asking the question has been asking the following two questions. What privileges do you have that I don't have? So typically that might be a young woman who's not white asking a question to a white man. And I remember seeing this very recently, in fact this morning. I think it was Savannah Fernandez asking a young white man. When I say young, he was college age, possibly a little bit older than college age. Very pleasant. It was a very pleasant exchange. And Savannah Fernandez, this young brown-skinned woman, asking this very much white young man, quote, "What privileges do you have as a white man that I don't have as a non-white young woman?" And the young man thought about it for a while, and he was stumped. And he admitted as much. He said, "You've stumped me there." Fernandez pressed the point a bit. She said, "Why did you go automatically to saying you have white privilege?" Because that's what had happened. In the beginning of the conversation, Savannah Fernandez had asked a question like, what's the difference between you and me, to the young white man, and he had said something about how he had white privilege. And she said, "Why did you go automatically to saying you had white privilege?" He then looked her in the eye and he said, "Well, he said effectively, you're a young non-white woman asking me about the differences in society between us two, and I sort of felt that I had to answer white privilege, because if I didn't, I could get in trouble, I could get canceled." Which was an extremely interesting thing. In other words, the implication is that under the surface, in all these interactions, where the woke crowds and the woke goons get so upset about some teeny tiny thing that someone has said or someone has done, really underneath the surface, all the white people clamoring to say the right thing so they don't get canceled do not for a second believe the garbage they're saying. Another online influencer, if you will, who does this very effectively is a young woman named Pearl Davis, and she routinely goes out into the streets of London, where I believe she lives. I don't know if she does this anymore, because I don't know if she lives in London anymore, but she challenges passers-by, and she says again, she poses that very same question: what privileges do you have that I don't have? And typically she'll pose that to a man. So in other words, the question pertains to male privilege, this weird notion of male privilege, which of course is nonsense, because anyone who has ever been a man knows that there's no such thing as male privilege. But the point being that this stumps her interlocutor every single time. They cannot answer that question. They have no idea what privileges they, as men, have that she, as a young woman, does not have. And in fact, as it turns out, Pearl then goes through this absolutely deadly list of privileges that she has by virtue of the simple fact of her birth that the men do not have. She walks through family law. She walks through a divorce, of course. She walks through affirmative action. She talks about all the options available to women that are simply not available to men. For instance, women can opt out of the workforce if they want and just become traditional wives. Men really can't ever even think about opting out of the workforce, and so they don't. They work from the moment they can, at age 16 or so, till the moment they retire, if they're lucky, at age 60, 65, and hopefully they have a few good years left in retirement. The most important part of this, though, is the Savannah Fernandez portion of this particular post, in which it really seems obvious that a lot of people say all the things that they think are the right things that won't get them canceled, that won't get them fired, won't have any implications on their professional or personal lives, but they do not believe them for a moment, and they don't believe them one teeny tiny bit. That's very, very heartening. Now, if people could just be honest about that and simply say, this is a bunch of twaddle, it's a bunch of nonsense, hogwash, codswallop, we don't believe it for a moment. That literally might be all we need to do to save Western civilization, at least from the woke nonsense.